Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Walero.
And we are
the FAIRtax guys.
They are still all pumped. It's not long. We'll be heading up to CPAC to talk to the FAIRtax, talk about the FAIRtax to some really heavy movers and shakers here shortly.
Yep. Yeah, it's only a matter of weeks getting close here. That's good.
It's
good. Looking forward to it.
Ideal. I'll tell you what, we're going to, today's episode, we've been talking a lot about going up to CPAC. And we want to make sure that everybody understands that the FAIRtax is not a partisan issue. It is not a conservative issue. There are some really good reasons for everybody on every side of every political spectrum to like the FAIRtax, and we're going to be getting into that in a minute. But first, we've got a fun little idea we're going to play with.
Yeah.
And we would like your help. If you give us some input at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com is our email address, or a comment or a suggestion on our Facebook page, The FAIRtax Guys. You know, the Geico has that little green gecko character.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Aflac has the duck. Budweiser had the frogs a while back.
Yeah.
And somebody was thinking the FAIRtax needs a mascot.
Yeah.
And we're thinking, okay, well, not just any mascot for the sake of having one. We got to have one that works.
Yeah.
So we are asking folks, what would be a good idea? If you could start from scratch, what would be a good mascot to promote the FAIRtax? It can be an animal, it could be a bird, it can be just, you're unlimited in what you can have. But we'd like to hear what your idea might be and how it would work.
Yeah, we got this idea from a volunteer in the Jacksonville area. And Paul Livingston, one of our board members here in Florida, said he's a very active volunteer. He attends a lot of outdoor events, meets the public and so forth. His name is Bill Rodriguez. Thank you, Bill. We think it's a great idea. I passed it off to Randy's Marketing Communications Committee. They think it's a good idea, and so now we're engaging you, the public. Give us an idea. I mean, we've had a couple of ideas, all right?
Of course, I like mine best, right?
Well, yes, of course, yes.
And I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't want to influence anybody out there. I want to hear your thoughts, unfiltered, unsolicited, with what you think would make a good mascot. And hopefully we can get a costume or made up for this thing like the mascots at the ballparks at the Major League Baseball have. But that'd be real. And then I volunteer you to wear it.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. No charge.
Get somebody with some artistic ability that can draw a little character of some kind. And we also, along with the character, we need to have an understanding of how we're going to use it, how we're going to market it. And we are, here in Florida and across the country, we are looking at ways to improve our marketing of the FAIRtax to attract more people. We need more people coming to our websites, whether it's your state website or the national website. We need people involved because that's how we're going to get this across the finish line with lots of people demanding it.
Yeah, especially it's important now that Congress has signed what they think is their big, huge tax reform package, and they're ready to move on. They don't want to hear any more about tax reform.
Yeah.
And we got to convince them you didn't give us tax reform, you gave us tax relief, for which we are thankful. But you did not reform the system. We've still got everything that was wrong with the income tax before this reform went through is still there, and it's still wrong with the income tax now, and we've got to fix it.
Yeah.
So, but
we guarantee that when we're at CPAC, we're going to contact and grab as many politicians as possible and talk to them, make sure they understand that, okay, what they did is a stopgap measure, but you still got the income tax, you still got the IRS, you still got huge compliance costs for companies, and there's just a lot of other problems, and we are still gunning for real tax reform, which is the FAIRtax.
So we will encourage you to remain engaged, remain on the front lines of the battlefield with your call-ins to your local talk shows. If you can get through to one of the big national talk shows, that'd be all the better.
Yeah.
Letters to the editor, just continue to be visible. And your support for the FAIRtax. Call your Congress people, show up at their town halls, and let them know, thanks for what you did, but it's not really what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, keep pounding them, folks, because you're the ones that are going to make the difference.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's get into the main topic of discussion on this episode of FAIRtax Power Radio.
Yeah.
As I say, we've been talking about going to CPAC, and it is a misconception, a common misconception out there, that the FAIRtax was a Tea Party idea, that it came out of the Republican Party, that the only conservatives like it, and so on and so on and so on. And while it is true that most of the support that we've had for the FAIRtax so far has come from the right side of the political aisle, there are still plenty of reasons. If you're a moderate or a Democrat or even a flaming liberal, is still a real good reason for you to like the FAIRtax, and we're going to convince you of it right here and right now.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the fair tax legislation predates the Tea Party by 10 years.
Yeah, that's it. They think this is a Tea Party idea. I says, no. The fair tax was hatched a full decade before the Tea Party was even thought of. So this is not a Tea Party idea, even though you will see a lot of fair tax signs and stuff at Tea Party type rallies. A lot of the Tea Party people do like it, but it is not a Tea Party idea. It came from a bunch of Houston businessmen in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And the Tea Party was formed in the early 2000s.
And we've had some great support from both sides of the aisle. In fact, you've got one there, don't you, Bob?
Oh, well, I've got what now?
That letter from Jessica Wexler.
Oh, I do. Let's see. It's written in very small print.
Yeah.
But,
you need your bifocals?
Now, first, remind everybody who Jessica Wexler is. She is obviously a Democrat.
Yeah.
And she worked for
Mr. Obama.
She worked for the Obama campaign. Is that true?
Yeah. And look at that first paragraph there. She said she was...
I am an Obama state field organizer who loves the fair tax. It makes perfect sense to me, and I'm encouraging other Democrats to join our fight. This is from Jessica Wexler.
Now, remind folks that this letter was written in 2009.
Okay.
Yep.
This letter was written in 2009. Folks.
Oh, good.
You got that?
Okay, thanks.
Okay. She continues, I've always felt it's the argument between Democrats and Republicans that makes us strong as a nation, the debate of ideas. The free and passionate exchange of very different ideas is only found in a nation that is comfortable with liberty and freedom of speech, and the American people have always figured out the best course by debating different viewpoints.
Yeah.
She's definitely right about that.
Absolutely.
With the fair tax, the partisan divisions that sometimes split us apart can be healed, and I agree with that as well. And so here's an idea that's actually good for everybody except the tax lobbyists, of course. So there are people, very prominent Democrats, that are on board with the fair tax. And one of the reasons, of course, is really that it matches, it comes up, it meets every one of the Democrats' agenda for it's more progressive.
Yep.
More progressive, actually, than the current income tax. And we say, how does that happen?
Bob, there's actually a document, a PDF on this. If they go to fairtax.org and click the research tab up on top, and then from there click demographics, they'll find this document. So you know what? Why don't we just let them look the document up ourselves, and we can talk about sports. Okay, maybe not.
No. Although I do want to know who's going to win the Daytona 500 here in about a month. But,
okay. Anyways.
But the deal is, usually when people talk about a consumption tax, a sales tax, the first thing people think of, it's regressive.
Yeah.
We hear that all the time. And if you're talking about a normal sales tax like most states impose, that's true. If you take the same percentage from everybody's income, 23% of what Donald Trump makes, he can live sumptuously on what's left. You take 23% away from someone who's just barely getting by on a minimum wage job, and you have hit them really hard.
Yeah, that's true.
So you cannot take the same percentage from everybody and call that fair. That is highly regressive, and the fair tax fixes that in a number of ways. First of all, the fair tax replaces the payroll taxes that are currently taking out of the paychecks of people who are working for a paycheck. The FICA deduction, which supports Social Security. There's a Medicare payroll tax as well. And the funny thing is that those people who are working for a paycheck under the current system are the only ones that are supporting Social Security and Medicare. People up there that are making their living, trading commodities or buying and selling stock or in the real estate market and are not working for a paycheck for which they get a W-2 at the end of the year, those folks are not contributing to Social Security any way, shape, or form at all. It is the working people, and in a lot of cases, the lower middle class, the working poor, on whose backs the bulk of funding Social Security and Medicare is currently falling. And the fair tax fixes that by it gets rid of those payroll taxes.
Yeah.
And then a certain percentage of the fair tax's proceeds is already earmarked for Social Security and Medicare. There are people out there that will tell you the fair tax is going to get rid of those taxes so the programs go away. The funding dries up. No,
we're getting ahead of ourselves, though.
No.
Bob is absolutely right. If you're a low-income worker, you may be able to avoid the income tax, but you cannot avoid the FICA tax, the tax on Social Security and Medicare. And believe me, the Social Security and Medicare tax is a tax. It is not a premium. It is not an insurance payment, as some people would have you believe. Mm-hmm. If you think it is, please show me a policy number.
Yes.
Okay? Yeah, it's not going to happen. It is a tax. It has been agreed to about its tax nature in the Supreme Court several times, and Congress can raise it. It really hurts the working poor more, as Bob said, because it's 7.65 no matter what your income level is.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So those people
and
at
it's
the
nothing
bottom,
if you're not working for a W-2.
Yeah,
nothing if you're not working for a paycheck. That's not right. And of course, the Democrat Party and the folks on the left side of the aisle say, and I'm right with them. I love fairness. I think things to be fair. I'm with them on that.
That's right.
But you cannot be fair by hitting the lower class and the middle class and the lower working class poor with this highly regressive payroll tax that the uber wealthy don't pay.
That's
and
right.
the fair tax fixes that, and I would think every Democrat in the world would love that.
Yep, and as this document says, the fair tax is far more progressive than the current income tax, especially the FICA tax. And under the fair tax, low-income households experience 5 times the benefit increase as compared to high-income households. Let me say that again. Under the fair tax, low-income households experience 5 times the benefit increase as compared to high-income households. Yeah, because they are really helped the most. So,
Now that comes from a paper, and I'm not Jokic, Sabine, Lawrence. I'm trying to read the footnote here as to where that came from. It's called Stimulating the Dynamic Microeconomic and Macroeconomic and Microeconomic Effects of the Fair Tax.
I'm going to guess.
I can barely read that.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that Dr. Karen Walby put these 10 reasons together, but she did it by largely taking research that other people have already published. It's not just her, although
this
she's
particular paper was
extremely
published in April of 2007 that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the fair tax has not been monkeyed with. The proposal that is the fair tax today is exactly the same proposal that was the fair tax in 2007. So statements that were made at that time are still true today because we have not changed the fair tax one bit.
That's right. Yeah. So it just, I could say it gets better and better, but it already has been better. So reason 2, the fair tax eliminates the highly regressive tax on wages, which is what we were talking about for the poor and the middle class. And we've already talked about that. Let's go on to number 3. Hey, Bob?
Yeah, but let's embellish that just a little bit, because it says currently payroll taxes are imposed only on the first $97,500. So if you make that much, if you make more than that, then those taxes drop off dramatically.
All right.
So the people that are making that, I'm what?
Your document is a little older.
Okay. Yours says
because
what?
that, according to this one, it's the payroll taxes are currently imposed on the first $118,500.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, and that does change from year to year, but yeah, and that's another thing. So, if you make over $118,500, and it could be more than that right now. So they don't take any more.
The heaviest burden of supporting Social Security and Medicare is currently falling on the lower end of the working class.
Imagine a family of 4 that Health and Human Services says gets about $32,000 just to maintain, to buy food, clothing, and shelter and so forth, and they're just making that $32,000 or $35,000. That FICA tax coming out of them is really important. All right.
Yeah, there's a quote in here from Robert Reich, who is a well-known, left of the aisle person who was a former U.S. Secretary of Labor. He's quoted as saying, "Everyone hates taxes, but the payroll tax has got to be the worst. 4 out of 5 American workers pay more in payroll taxes than they do in income taxes."
Yeah,
and the fair tax gets rid of that.
It eliminates it altogether. All right.
So think about it. Those payroll taxes go away. The fair tax also replaces the federal income tax and the withholding that supports it, which means when the fair tax becomes law, the working poor, and actually everybody, but it's especially going to be a boon to the working poor, they will bring home the full gross amount of their paycheck.
Yeah, just imagine what that will do for their household.
Yeah. Now, if you consider yourself to be a champion of the working poor, in the lower middle class, you could not advocate for a better thing than getting rid of those payroll taxes, getting rid of the withholding, letting people bring home the entire gross amount of their paycheck, minus any, voluntary deductions, like if you're getting some out for insurance or you're putting some away in a savings plan or something like that.
Some states that have a state income tax, that's another issue.
Uncle Sam will no longer be grabbing his big 2 tons of flesh off the top of your paycheck.
Yeah.
And you would be bringing home a lot more. So if you're advocating for the working poor, you have got to support this. There's just no other way.
And as Bob already mentioned, that it does nothing to harm Social Security and Medicare. They are protected, and you can look it up on FAIRtax.org if you want to. The bill itself is only 113 pages, and you can look down there and find out how it's funded. All right.
Yeah, the end of Robert Reich's quote here, let me get it. It says, the payroll tax is regressive as hell. Poorer workers pay proportionately more than richer ones.
Yeah.
And that's coming from Robert Reich, who is certainly no conservative and no Tea Party activist.
That's for sure. Okay. All right, number 3?
Go for it.
All right. The FAIRtax is the only plan that completely untaxes the poor. How does it do that? How can you untax the poor when they're when they have to pay this FAIRtax when they buy stuff?
How about you rebate back to them the tax that they are paid at the cash register that they don't owe?
Wow.
Give it back to them, so you not only bring home the full gross amount of your paycheck, you get a tax refund every single month guaranteed.
Yep.
Because, again, one of the beauties of the FAIRtax is that you do not owe a dime in federal taxes until your spending exceeds the poverty level, i.e. until you have taken care of your family's basic necessities. And again, with the FAIRtax, the government is not telling you what a necessity is. I mean, you said you're allowed to spend this amount of money without it being taxed on whatever you think is necessary for your family. And so that's a good idea. And you know what 23% of that amount is? That's how much is given back to you. So you're not going to try to keep track of how much everybody spends and then impose or not impose the tax based on whether they have or have not crossed that threshold. You collect the FAIRtax on every qualifying purchase, which is new goods and services. Used goods are not taxed, by the way. But you collect the tax from $1 on the retail purchase of all new goods and services, but you rebate back to the poor, back to everybody actually, the tax that they don't owe, the tax that is collected from them that they don't owe. And then if you're spending right at the poverty level, what you pay in FAIRtax at the cash register will be pretty much, if not completely, reimbursed to you by this prebate, and your out-of-pocket tax rate is 0.
Yep. Now, some people, when they first hear about the prebate, they ask the question, well, how do they know how much your prebate is going to be? You're still going to have to submit your income. No. It doesn't work like that. No, it doesn't work like that. Right now, we're waiting for the new poverty figures from Health and Human Services. Hopefully, shortly after this episode is published, we're going to have those, and we're going to have our new prebate schedule. But right now, let's take a family of 4. Family of 4, mom and dad and 2 kids. The prebate is $623. How did they get that? Well, the Health and Human Services has poverty levels for a family of 4. And it's 32 something. I don't have it in front of me. But anyways, they take that, multiply it by 23%, take that figure and divide it by 12, and that's how much that family gets. In other words, it doesn't make any difference how much they make. I mean, they could be just getting by and earning $32,000, or they could be, doing very well and earning $232,000. Makes no difference. Based on their family size, family of 4, they're going to get $623. And I expect that figure to go up here a little bit more.
It will a little bit.
Yeah,
but the idea, of course, is that the FAIRtax treats everybody the same.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't matter what your income level is, from $32,000 to, $532,000 a year, nobody pays taxes on the basic necessities of life. Of course, people that are way up there on the upper end of the income scale, they will be buying and spending a lot more than what it takes to provide the basic necessities of life for their family. Those folks are going to pay the FAIRtax out of their own pocket, and the more they spend, the more they take out of their own pocket to pay the FAIRtax. It is mathematically impossible with a FAIRtax for someone who spends more to pay a lower rate than someone who spends less.
That's right.
It depends on how much you spend, period.
Yep. And you control it with your spending habits, because another advantage that the working poor have, let's say that their car dies and they have to get another car because, mom and or dad have to go to work, so they need a car. Well, they don't have to buy a new car and pay the fair tax. They can buy a used car and avoid the fair tax, legally avoid the fair tax, because there is no fair tax charged on used stuff. Somebody already paid for it once whenever that item was new, whether it's a car, a house, an airplane, a boat, a TV, or whatever. Used stuff is not subject to the fair tax. So that's another huge advantage for the working poor.
Yeah, so if you go to somebody's town hall and you bring up the idea of the fair tax and they say it's a sales tax, it's regressive, you have now got the weapons with which to shoot that argument down really quickly. Anybody that tells you that the fair tax is regressive, be it a politician, be it a newspaper editor, or be it your brother-in-law or whatever, if they tell you the fair tax is regressive, you can tell them that is just simply not so. Because it's the only tax. The income tax doesn't give you a prebate. The income tax gives you a tax refund if your withholding exceeds your tax liability.
Yeah, if you extended the government an interest-free loan.
That's exactly what you did. But the fair tax will let you bring home the full gross amount of your paycheck. It gets rid of those highly regressive payroll taxes that even Robert Reich says are, well, I won't repeat his words, but they're nasty things to deal with if you're a working poor. And so if you are a champion of the working poor, and it doesn't matter whether you got a D or an R beside your name, if you care about the lower middle class or the middle class working people and you want to help them, you cannot do anything for them that would give them any more than the fair tax does.
All right. So again, as Bob said, if you hear somebody say, well, the fair tax is a sales tax and therefore it's regressive, you know automatically they don't truly understand the fair tax, and you can educate them. Because
Absolutely.
You have the facts.
Let's scoot on here. Time's getting away from us.
Yep.
Another thing that the fair tax does, it makes American goods much more competitive on the world marketplace. We've talked about this before.
That's
when
right.
America's businesses compete more successfully on the global marketplace, there is more demand for American-made goods. And what happens when that happens? People get jobs.
Yeah.
The fair tax is the greatest jobs bill you could possibly imagine.
It does it in several ways. For instance, if a European country, when they export stuff from their country to ours, they remove the VAT tax. I believe all the European countries have a VAT tax, and they remove that tax. And so their product can compete more favorably with ours. Right now, under our situation, our products have these embedded costs, not only due to the income tax, but due to the complexity of the income tax and the compliance costs. So when our products go overseas, they have all these embedded costs due to the income tax in there that you can't remove by the current structure. We're at a severe disadvantage. Well, when you go to the fair tax, and not only does the income tax disappear, but the compliance costs are tremendously reduced. American products now become very, very competitive on the world market.
So if you want to make jobs available to American workers, the fair tax will do it. And I tell you what, we're probably not getting through this whole list. There's 10 lists, and we're only about halfway through it. But so let's move on as quickly as we can. The fair tax untaxes education.
There you go.
There is no fair tax charged on education, tuition, things like that.
Yep, that is about the only exemption in the entire plan, because people, legislators have understood for decades, you want people to gain in education. You want them to be more educated. More educated people usually get higher paying jobs, whether it's an income tax or a fair tax. Higher paying jobs mean people spend more, all right? And obviously with the fair tax, you want people spending more. That way the government collects more taxes. And, all those wonderful legislators up there, they get all that tax money to play with. Anyways, that's another story.
Yeah, moving right along. Our current income tax system does not tax existing wealth.
Yeah,
there you go. If you put stuff away in a savings account, or if you get a lot of capital gains, stuff like that, that is going to be taxed with a fair tax when you spend it. You're going to target existing wealth that the current income tax system does not do, and not the fruits of one's labor.
Because remember, if you have somebody who makes a lot of money and they put some of it in savings, for an economist, the definition of savings is deferred spending. It will be spent at some time. Right now, if it's in savings someplace, that means the bank has it, and they can extend loans to other companies that want to, a startup company or something like that. but at some point that money is going to be spent. So, and the fair tax?
And currently the wealthy have got, loopholes. They can move their money offshore. There are lots of ways that a high-income person can shield his income from taxation.
And they can do it legally.
Tax shelters and loopholes and stuff like that, gimmicks like that, they all go away.
Yeah.
Because, again, when it is spent, it is taxed, period, as long as you're talking about retail purchases of new goods and services.
Yeah.
So I guess if you buy a used Learjet, you can avoid the fair tax on that.
There you go.
Oh, mercy. Keep going. We got about 3 minutes left here.
Okay. All right. The fair tax boosts real growth and prosperity in the U.S. Yeah, for several reasons. Well, there's a number of reasons. Yes, it eliminates the income tax, but more importantly, it eliminates the compliance costs, most of the compliance costs, because for small businesses, their compliance costs are many times greater than the income tax itself. And it's the small businesses that create most of the jobs in this country. Secondly, the repatriation. The tax plan recently passed by Congress and signed by the president. They're ballyhooing, they're lauding the reduction in the repatriation tax. Well, how about if we eliminate it altogether? No repatriation tax. All those trillions of dollars of American dollars that are offshore, they come flowing back. Talk about a stimulus.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Yeah, this research paper that this article references, this is coming from, is said that the GDP here would be 10.3% higher. 10.3% growth. Now, they're crowing about 4% now.
Yeah.
This is the fair tax will more than double that.
Yep. So, it will bring growth and prosperity back, gangbusters.
All right, say we got maybe 2 minutes left. Hit one more of those points over there.
Okay, fair tax is revenue neutral. The fair tax is designed, and a lot of research has been done to make sure that the government gets the funding that it needs. It's not going to starve the government, and it's not going to give it too much, all right? It's going to give it the same level of funding right now. And the other thing is that spending is a more stable taxing item than income. Income varies a lot when the economy takes a nosedive. Spending doesn't dip that much. So spending is more stable tax base.
Absolutely. So again, if you're looking out for the lower middle class, the working folks, with a fair tax, you should support this because the withholding goes away. The payroll taxes go away. You get a prebate every month. The folks on the lower end of the scale get a really big bonanza with a fair tax. And if you're a champion of them, as you claim to be on the left side of the aisle, you should be supporting the fair tax because it helps the folks that you say are your constituents. And I would love to see that happen.
Yep. So if you run into somebody that thinks that the fair tax is regressive because it's because it's a sales tax, well, you know the answers. And there are all kinds of reasons why the Democrats should support this. Things are pretty polarized in Washington, and it's true that we don't have any Democrats signed on as co-sponsors. But at some point, we're going to come back to a more even keel, and I think that will happen. And what we're pushing for is in the next couple of years, we're going to have President Trump go for the fair tax because we know he's familiar with this. And, frankly, I don't care who signs the bill. If it's a Republican or a Democrat, it's got to be done for us, folks, for us.
Absolutely it does. So that's it. Again, we are really excited to be going to CPAC.
Yep.
But if there were a big conference or convention on the other side of the political aisle, we'd be just as excited to carry the fair tax to them folks as well.
That's right.
Again, look for us on Spreaker. Also, we'll be doing Facebook Live from CPAC, which is the 21st is kind of a setup day, 22nd through 24th.
Yeah.
Are the days of February when we're going to be there. So I hope you can get, again, if you've got an idea of what a fair tax mascot could be or could look like, give us thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Drop us a note there. Leave us a note on our Facebook page. And with that is just about going to wrap up this edition of Fair Tax Power Radio. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
We are the Fair Tax Guys, reminding you, as we always do, that the fair tax is America's big solution. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Fair tax is coming.